So let's talk about bleeding for a minute. This is very important to get under control, right? And I mean, it's the kind of thing that if you don't do this right, you don't have to worry about any of the other stuff we're going to talk about, right? This is a big one. And the most intuitive, instinctive thing to do with a bleeding situation is to put direct pressure on it, and that's actually very effective in most cases. Now, be aware that blood from other people can be a carrier of bloodborne diseases, and so if it's somebody else's blood, you want to be wearing some gloves to protect yourself. This fellow's, stopping his own bleeding so he can, he's not going to catch AIDS from himself. But HIV, hepatitis, some other things that are transmissible by blood getting into your cuts and into your hands and things, so be aware of that. But direct pressure is great for most situations. If it's more intense than that, then sometimes you need to use pressure points. And these are just the old Boy Scout, pressure points that people have been using for years. There's large branches of large arteries that if you put pressure on them, you can slow the bleeding to that area. So there's your brachial artery, there's your femoral arteries down in your groin, your jugular, there's things on your hands and on your head and face. And so you can use those to slow the bleeding, and oftentimes that will be enough to give the body time to clot. In the worst case scenario, you might need to use a tourniquet. And when I started veterinary school, 25 years ago, I guess, they were very anti-tourniquet. I mean, their advice and what they taught us was, don't put a tourniquet on anything that you're not going to cut off later. They were pretty concerned about tourniquet use. They've softened up on that a lot. But it's still something that if you're going to use tourniquets, you ought to get some training. And another good idea is if you put a tourniquet on something, to write on the limb, with a Sharpie or something, what time you put that tourniquet on, so that the first responders or the ER guys know how long that tourniquet's been on there. We have some really great herbs for bleeding. And the three that I use most commonly, and there's others, but the three I use most commonly are shepherd's purse, cayenne, and yarrow. And all three of those plants are terrific internally or topically for bleeding. I've used them a lot. You get a dog come into the vet clinic that's been hit by a car and they're gushing blood, from their mouth and nose. And you just squirt a little cayenne tincture in there, or a cayenne and shepherd's purse tincture, or a yarrow tincture, any of those. Probably what I usually use is yarrow and shepherd's purse mixed. I mean, that's just what I usually use. It's like flipping a switch. I mean, that dog stops bleeding. And topically, they're remarkable too. And you can, for topical use, you wouldn't want to use the tincture. You'd want to use a powder, right? And then pack that into the wound, and that'll stop the bleeding. One of the names for yarrow is soldier wort. Wort is the old English word for plant. So, you have figwort and St. John's wort and motherwort. Well, soldier wort was the soldier plant, and yarrow was what it was. And they would pack a bag of yarrow. Even as late as World War I, they were still doing this. The ancient Greeks did it. I mean, in ancient times, it was very common. But even up to World War I, they were still, the guys that knew were packing a little bag of yarrow powder, and they'd, pack it into their wounds when they got injured to staunch the bleeding.